Hello, everybody. My name is Dr. Brenda Owoburiyosti. We appreciate you stopping by Little Rubies Daycare Encounters YouTube channel, where we emphasize play-based learning, wellness, and research-based solutions to issues in early childhood education. If you're new here, please subscribe, like, and comment for more educative, entertaining, research-based content. This is the first episode of WAGE interviews, and WAGE stands for World Advocacy for Growth in Education. WAGE is dedicated to interviewing educators from all over the world with the goal of comparing educational programs and practices, between countries. We're privileged today to have Nancy Ekpezu with us. And Nancy is a professional administrator. She's a management consultant and life coach. She has lots of years, about 25 years in education, 15 of which were as a school leadership, at the school leadership level. Nancy, I'm gonna bring her in. Hi, Nancy.
Hi, Dr. Brenda.
How are you? Nice to meet you.
Same here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming and stopping by today. So, Nancy, where are you currently located?
I'm in Lagos, Nigeria.
Okay. And the first question I want to ask you is, how did you begin your career in education?
Well, I would say I stumbled on it. My first degree was actually in microbiology. Okay. And so, you know how it is in Nigeria, I completed my National Youth Service, which is what we do for a year after graduating. Okay. And I was posted to a school actually during that period. And when I completed the NYSC, I did not get a job in my area. And so I had to... I just continued, where I served, they were really, really impressed at my performance, and they were like, well, since you don't have a job yet, why don't you just stay here while you look for a job in the area of your desire? Incidentally, I ended up liking it. I'm just saying, and I've been in the sector since then. That's really the story. It wasn't a planned thing. I didn't study education in my first degree, and I didn't ever plan to teach. Even though one of my parents had been a teacher at some point in her life, my mom, but I never quite dreamt that I'll be in the education space. But I must say I'm enjoying the whole thing. I love the journey, and I love all of the schools we have worked and made an impact in one way or the other in the classroom and also at the school leadership level. And right now my core really is administration and management. Yeah.
So I know you said NYSC, the National Youth Service Corps. Can you give us a brief summary of what that is in your country?
Okay, in Nigeria, when you finish your first degree, you're posted to a state outside of where you're from, so that you get a job there and work for a year. You are paid just some little allowance, to keep you going. But the aim is to actually create unity in Nigeria and expose you to the cultures of other people, around the country. So I did mine in Kano, which is in the northern Nigeria. And incidentally, I got to stay back there. Despite the shock culture initially for the first 1 year, I got to stay back there. And that was actually where my teaching career began.
Okay.
So the NYSC exposes you to cultures from other places. If you're Yoruba, for example, you may get a chance to be among the Hausas or the Igbos. And it's actually a program aimed at, developing skills in young people, young graduates, and also exposing them to various cultures in Nigeria. And through it, some people have been able to get married. I had friends who got married in Kano, and they've been there since. So I think the aim of the program has been achieved in a lot of ways. So I don't know what it is like now, but when we had it back then, it was really effective. It was a great one.
Wow. So I want to ask you, what was your motivation to become an educator? Why not nursing or engineering or law? Why education?
Well, like I said, I didn't actually study education, so there was no motivation at all. But I think what happened was when I got into the sector, I realized that I was just at home, and the kids loved me. I remember a particular incident that really stands out for me. When I was teaching a grade 3 class, there was this set of kids who came in from Egypt and couldn't speak English, and one of the kids was in my class. And so the other kids would poke fun at him, and he felt so uneasy. And I remember I took a particular interest in him and got to meet with his parents. Even as inexperienced as I was, then I knew that I could do something to help him. Yeah. And I met with the parents and gave extra support without any added fees or anything. And I must say, after about 8 months, I couldn't actually recognize this timid boy who was in my class. And the parents were all over me and in tears. And they were like, wow, you've just changed their life. And it was such a life-transforming experience for me. And I felt so wanted and needed, and so that the skills I had were actually needed in this sector. And so I must say, experiences like that helped me. And you will not believe, years later, I ran into this boy at an airport, and he was now studying aeronautic engineering in the UK. Wow. And he just ran to me and said, that's the woman that changed my life. And I had tears all over me, Yeah, so such moments, they really inspired me to stay in the sector.
That's amazing, how educators can change the lives of people. It's just amazing. And it doesn't even matter where you are. All over the world, educators are changing people's lives.
A whole lot.
So can you give us a brief description of the Nigerian educational system? Because the last I can remember, it was the 6334 system, where you had to spend 6 years in primary school, 3 years in junior secondary school, and then another 3 years in secondary school, and then finally 4 years in college. Well, at least 4 years in college. So is there a new system in Nigeria now, or it's still the same thing?
Well, right now, kids spend 6 years in the elementary school, and they do 3 years in the junior secondary, and then 3 years in the senior secondary, and move on to the university. We've had all kinds of names given to all of this, but I think what's important is just that we have a national curriculum that we run, especially in the public schools. And then in the private sectors, most people actually use a blend of maybe British or American, or a blend of Nigerian and British. It's neither here nor there. I think people just define what works for them, really.
Yeah.
Even the system that says we should do 6 years in elementary school, you find that some schools do 5.
Okay.
And then you still move on. So I wouldn't say it's, yes, there is a system, but I wouldn't say we really have it all together yet, but we are doing beautifully as a people, even with what we have. Yeah, we're doing beautifully.
So I want to ask you, the world has seen a lot going on with COVID-19, with the pandemic, and it has impacted various aspects of, the world, in education, in engineering, in law, in all aspects of human endeavor. In the United States, for instance, in the educational sector, there is a shift from the regular traditional face-to-face classroom experience, to now virtual learning, where students now have to log in to the computer, to go to class. And children as young as the elementary school aged children. So has the pandemic impacted Nigerian education in any way?
Oh, it has. I must say, hugely it has. A lot of schools have had to make that transition to learning virtually. But then as a developing nation, we also know that there are little issues we've had to grapple with, such as power, and internet supply is quite expensive for some schools. But I've been very impressed at all of the changes going on suddenly, and all the skills teachers have had to learn. The ones who were not very tech savvy have had to learn so much to be able to cope with teaching children virtually. Parents have also had to do a lot of stepping up to be able to supervise what goes on at home. So it has impacted the education space in Nigeria a great deal, and I don't think it will ever be the same again. It has had its positive impact in really helping teachers develop their skills in a way that they would not have, because it became more like an emergency. Everybody just had to be online. Everybody had to learn one thing or the other. But for those who had been doing that over the years, it wasn't really a struggle. Okay. But where my concern is that some schools could really not afford to go online, so they had to also find a way around it. I understand some schools had to do maybe having work kept in the school and having parents just drive in and pick to go home and do stuff with their children. But whichever one, I think Nigerians really rose up a great deal to see that they were able to fill the gap, and I'm really impressed and happy about that.
Yeah, that's kind of what we have down here. I know some parents are not very computer savvy, so they're complaining about logging in and getting used to the system. But I think that's the thing about change. Change is not easy, but you adapt to it with time. So I guess with learning and the learning curve, we'll all move with time, because we better get used to this. This is the new normal, and we have to make the best. So I'm gonna move to something else, and this is school funding. It's a big deal with school funding. Like, you might have private sector funding, you might have grants and loans and government funding schools right here in the United States. I'm kind of curious, how is funding in Nigeria? Like, how are schools funded in Nigeria?
Well, the public schools are funded directly by the government. Okay. And then the private schools are privately funded.
Okay.
So basically, there are lots of private schools in Nigeria, and the proprietors, do their stuff by themselves. They get their funding, they pay salaries from there, the infrastructure and everything they do is basically from what they get from the school fees that the parents pay for their children. Okay. That's basically how it's done. And some people go into partnerships, which is not very common.
Okay. Yeah, that's kind of similar to what we have here. There are private schools funded by the private individual, and also there are public schools, funded by the public school and the government. So I think we're kind of similar in our funding systems. There is Can you tell me 3 major elements that you would say have contributed to the growth of schools in Nigeria? Like, specifically in cities where you've worked in.
Okay, I've worked in Lagos, Abuja, Kano, and Calabar. I think that Nigerians are generally very resilient people. Okay. We're very resourceful and resilient. We have a whole lot of challenges, but we're so, dogged and always trying to make things work in the little way that we can in our little corners. I would say that parents want the best education for their children in Nigeria, and so whenever they see a school that can provide that and they can afford it, or they opt for it, so that helps the private schools to keep going.
Okay.
So another would be that despite poor funding, we just find a way around things. We try to be resourceful. Yeah, we try to be very resourceful.
Okay, I'm just going to write, parents want the best education for their children.
Oh, they do. Yeah, they do. And we are ready to provide that.
Yeah, I think that's a general thing, all over the world. Of course, you want the best thing for your children.
Yeah.
Okay. So, what challenges have you encountered personally, that you think, actually, do you think those challenges are common to educators or with educators in Nigeria?
The challenges I've seen really working in schools from the school administrator from a school administrator's perspective is that some schools do not have a proper structure. And usually when there's a professional administrator who wants to straighten the system and get things running professionally, it poses a challenge because it's not just something a lot of schools are used to. So we could have a more professional structure, a more business structure to schools than what we have. But I think some schools are rising up to that, and that's impressive, but we still have quite some way to go there. So personally, that's my own observation, and one area that I would really love to see a change. I think that's because I'm a professional administrator. I like to see schools run with a proper structure. Everybody has contracts, job descriptions, your leaves are, properly defined, the code of conduct is properly defined, and everything is done, within a proper structure while still giving room for creativity and innovation.
Right.
So that's one area I would like to see a change. I see that we still have some way to go there, yes.
I have kind of seen that here in the United States, where people set up schools or lead schools, but really don't have the experience, and the know-how of being in the educational sector. So I think that you do need to have that experience, and you do need to, if you don't know about educators and education, and you don't know about teachers, how can you lead them, in the right direction?
Exactly.
That's very important. And then is there another challenge you think?
Another would be I think the perception generally people have of educators.
Okay.
I think we could be perceived in a better way. Those who are in the education space, it always looks like, well, this is a place where you could just hop into if you do not have a job in any other sector that you want. And so I would say that we should reserve the best for the education sector and not just have people come in just because they couldn't get jobs. But that happens to me. That's how I got in, by the way. But I think that that's not the best way to go about it. I think that we should get to that point where people are proud to study education and say you have youth looking up to educators and desiring to be like them. But I don't think we are quite there yet. We still have, some way to go. Exactly. So the perception of teachers could change. I mentioned a bit about that in my book, The Educator. I think I dedicated basically that book is about everything about educators, what it takes to be a 21st century educator. And I did talk about perception people have and how educators can rebrand themselves personally to be perceived in a different way. Because in as much as that happens, I do know educators I've encountered that I've been hugely impressed at. And I have quite a lot of them in my circle, and they're doing amazing. So I would like such role models to replicate themselves, all over, and have people perceive those in the education sector as professionals and people that need to be looked up to and respected in their own right as professionals.
Yeah. And I'm actually going to leave a link of your books, your websites, because I know you're very active, in social media, and you have. We met on LinkedIn. You have LinkedIn page. You have Facebook. I'm actually going to leave links below so you can contact Nancy directly. And she does classes as well, educational classes. She's a student educator, and I'm glad you're here today. Doing this interview.
I'm glad to be here today.
So what? Another major thing about educational administration is hiring and retaining teachers. How is the hiring process like in Nigeria?
I would say there's no proper standard procedure. Every school does what works. But basically, when I work in a school, I try to determine where we need to fill, the vacancies we need to fill, and come up with proper job descriptions and the key skills that are needed in those areas. And so we now place adverts, which are basically usually on social media these days, because that's where you find 21st century teachers. That's basically where they hang out. So we don't do much of newspapers anymore like we used to. We do more on social media. Like the last school I just interviewed, I recruited people for. I recruited staff for them just a few weeks ago. I started the process all on social media. I sent out a form to get in the people who were interested to apply, after which I screened, and then I sent for their CVs and resumes, and then I screened again for the interview and shortlisted people, got them interviewed, and I was very particular about experience and skills that they were bringing in. These days, we try to lay less emphasis on just the paper qualification. The question is, what are you bringing to the table? And so the questions and the test given have to reflect exactly what they'll be doing on the job, not just some theoretical stuff that they learned in the school. Yeah. So after that, So after that, we have the interviews, we select, we make the offers, they accept, and then you have a proper orientation to have them in the system to be sure that they're a right fit for you. That's right. But we have an issue really with the recruitment process in the education space, is that we do not have processes for a background check and employment history of the people that we employ. Colleagues, I see Ronke Posh and Rotimi Eyitayo, they've actually been able to set up something to start addressing that. And that's one thing I like too in Nigeria. When there's a gap in one area, most people do not wait for the government. You just see educators rising up and addressing that issue. Exactly. So we need to improve on our background check, our employment histories, because anybody can claim they worked anywhere or claim that they achieved this and that from where they're coming from. These things need to be verified so that you're sure that you're picking the right fit. There's no perfect candidate, but every employer would want the best that they can get. And that would be dependent on how well they performed on their last jobs and the skills they've acquired and what they're actually bringing to the table. So I think that verification part is one area that we could improve on.
Yes. I love that you mentioned that, because here in the United States, that's a major part of the hiring process. You have to be screened, and there are different like screening agencies where you can get fingerprinted. Sometimes they require you get fingerprinted and checked from every state you've been in. So it's not just the state where you're looking for a job, it's the states you've lived in or you've been in. And that's important because you don't want criminals working with children, I know that. Absolutely. I know that the system does not, it's not 100% foolproof. People still can slip through the cracks and still get in the school, but mostly, for the most part, it is effective. That they're doing a great job with that, checking backgrounds and making sure we don't have criminals as teachers or as administrators or as school staff. And that's very important. I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I wasn't even thinking about asking, but it's very important. So what ways have you discovered that to support teachers, retention, are you retaining your teachers, and how are you doing that? Because the educational system, me being through it, especially in the childcare sector, the turnovers are very, very high. Like people are quitting, and for different reasons. Sometimes they don't get paid enough. Sometimes they get in the job and, oh man, this is not what I want to do. This is not the way I thought this job was going to be. So how do you retain teachers in Nigeria? How do you work with the turnovers? Are they high or are they low?
Well, I must say I got a shock on my first school administration job. And, at the end of the school year, we had resignations, and I had to start asking the teachers, have I done anything wrong? Am I poor administrator. And they said, no, it has nothing to do with you. We just usually would look for greener pastures because, this is not a job to stay forever. And so I was like, oh, thank God it's not about me really, But basically, I do know that the turnover rate in the education space is really alarming. And, but I also have worked in a school where we've had teachers stay till they actually retire. My last job was in a school where we had teachers who had been there. Some have been there for 15 years, some as long as 20 years. And most of the teachers I met there have actually been there for between 10 to 22 years. And so it's doable. Yeah. It's doable. So what I would recommend to schools is that you have a structure, because this was a very structured organization. Everybody knew that there was a salary scale. Everybody knew the benefits, leave allowances, everything. So when there's such a system, people can relax and say, well, this is a place to build, a career. This is a place I can stay and contribute to the organization's progress. But what happens really is that, I do know it's not intentional, but lots of employers would like to pay more because, they just skimp what they have and try to make sure salaries are paid. And so sometimes they leave for salary reasons, sometimes out of maybe poor leadership. I've been in a school where I had to resign because there was poor leadership. I didn't think that the right decisions were being taken or that the right recommendations were being considered when decisions were made. So people leave for poor leadership. Remember what we say, people leave poor bosses, they leave bad bosses, not necessarily the organization. But I also know that they leave because of salaries. When there are discrepancies in salaries and people, after interviewing you and you get a job offer, everybody tells you don't discuss with the next person, there's always something fishy. I mean, they say that everybody wants to find out what it is because it causes curiosity. And so they'll go ask the next person, how much are they paying you? And then you find out that maybe you're more qualified than they are, more experienced, you're bringing more to the table, you're earning more than you are. There's no explanation for it. And the employers do not even know that you have all talked about it behind his or her back, and everybody knows that they become disgruntled. So I think having a proper structure and some level of transparency and good leadership will go a long way to curbing this.
Good. Yeah. And you mentioned some of the issues we face here, like not very effective administrators. I think when you have staff, you should care about your staff,
Really?
It's not, I know their teachers are there to work and do their jobs and everything, but you still, they have personal lives,
Oh, they do.
Yeah, they may get sick, what program do you have in place, for instance, as an administrator, for a teacher who falls sick? Are you giving them, is there a sick leave in your program? And are they getting more money like as the year goes by, or does the teacher stay at a job for like 20 years and still earn the same amount of money that they started with? So these are policies administrators need to look at if they want to retain their teachers. And everything you said is very similar to what we have here in the United States. So in the United States, I know you kind of touched on this a little bit, but maybe we can hear a little bit more. In the United States, we have the Common Core curriculum. And so far, right now, there's about 41 states using that curriculum. And it's a curriculum that is general. So within the 41 states, whatever they are doing is kind of like the same thing, so that they all are doing something general. What's that word? Similar, general and similar. So can you tell us about the curriculum in Nigeria? Is there a common core curriculum? Do you have one curriculum where all the states in Nigeria are using it, or do individual states have different curriculum?
Well, in Nigeria, it's the same curriculum for all of the states.
Okay.
But like I said, a lot of things are a bit different here because the public schools actually keep to those to the curriculum recommended by the government. But
Okay.
you find out that in the private sector, parents have their desires, parents have their wishes. Some want the kids to learn the British curriculum, some want them to do the American curriculum. In the course of my being in the education space, I've done the Nigerian curriculum, I've done British curriculum, I've done the American curriculum, I've done a blend of British and Nigerian, but there is a general curriculum for all of the states in Nigeria, which is meant to be implemented in every state. What some schools do is to get the Nigerian curriculum and bring in British as well. I think it's an elite thing in Nigeria to have people say, oh, my child actually does the American curriculum or does the British curriculum, or just something. So it helps in marketing. It's become like a marketing thing for schools in Nigeria. And so I wouldn't say that all of the schools stick strictly to the Nigerian curriculum, even though it's a fine curriculum. I'm not a curriculum specialist. I have one or two people who are. But I do know that it's a fine curriculum if it's applied properly, but not every school follows it strictly.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious about how the Nigerian curriculum addresses what we call STEM or STEAM in America. And STEM simply means that the focus of the Common Core curriculum is science, technology, education, and maths. Or sometimes with the STEAM, there's art added to it. So it's science, technology, education, arts, and maths. So these are the basic subjects that students need to familiarize themselves with through the educational sector. How do you have a program like STEM in Nigeria? And how is it, what's that word now? How is the program like for your science, technology, education, and maths
Yes, we do we do have STEM in Nigeria.
Okay.
And, basically we found that, we're trying to move to really teach children skills.
Okay.
To make sure that they learn the right skills. So yes, we do have the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics programs going on. They're actually taking on fine. A lot of schools are adopting that, and even the government schools are already doing a whole lot with that, which is beautiful. So it's the same thing that you have in the US. Nigerians are actually doing a lot of that as well.
Yeah, and I have to go back and correct myself. I did say education, but it's engineering and math. So, tell me about mathematics specifically. How is that taught in Nigeria?
I would say that there's a general phobia for mathematics. I personally had a phobia for math when I was in school. I think it was the way it was approached then. But thankfully, teachers are beginning to realize that it doesn't have to be all abstract.
Okay.
And that through mathematics, children can develop problem solving and critical skills, and that it can actually be done in a way that is practicable and can be applied in everyday life. Yeah. Because it's so abstract, I think most times the children cannot connect it to real life. It just sounds like some theory somewhere that they will never need. So I think the approach should really be to teach it in a way that you bring it home, you bring practical examples, you bring in resources that they can relate with and get things done. Right. You let them know this is how it's done, and it will be better. It will also be nice if teachers do not pass on that anxiety to them that maths is some tough subject, you have to practice, and study night and day, every day to learn. When I did the American curriculum, I found out that it was such fun to teach the children math because we had so many resources to work with, and it was such fun. Even the things that I had learned in school that I didn't like, I found myself teaching them in a very fun way, and I really loved it. So I think we should leave. Yes, it's an abstract subject, but there's a way it can be taught, and made relevant. And for the children to know that is actually the skills they learn from math can be applied in engineering, in the material sciences, in the biological sciences, and a whole lot of other things. So even making it, connecting it to real life, connecting it to courses that they're going to study maybe in the university and that they're going to apply in real life, they will go a long way to dispel the fears that we have. And I think parents should also be made to know that there are lots of resources online where they can get materials from to work with their kids at home. And if they had fears about math like I did when I was in school, they do not have to, it doesn't have to end there. There are lots of things online now, lots of websites, lots of resources, worksheets, and even toys that they can play with, to learn, And then we could also have like math fairs and a lot more competitions to encourage the children to take part.
Okay. What about arts? Is it just emphasis on maths, technology, engineering? Is there any emphasis on arts?
Oh yes, the arts part STEAM, it's relevant too. We do a lot in the arts in Nigeria, and we're very gifted people. We do a whole lot in Nigeria, yes. We do a lot of that. I remember at school where I worked, and the kids actually, I made them take part in a competition in South Africa, and they were tops in the competition. So it means we were doing fine then. And there were a few other Nigerian schools at that competition that were also tops. So we do amazing, actually. Okay. We do amazing in Nigeria, in the arts, yes.
So, it's been amazing talking to you today. And we've learned a lot about Nigeria, the curriculum, the way STEM and STEAM is taught, funding, just all kinds of things. And we've also learned that as far as Nigeria goes and American goes, in terms of education, there are a lot of similarities in retention of teachers, in funding, in the curriculum. Regardless of the fact that they are seas and mountains apart, they are very similar in how they deal with education. So I'm so glad you came here today. I'm glad that we were able to learn a lot about you and the educational sector in your country. And I just want to ask for like a last remark, if you have any, before we sign off today.
Okay, the world is global now. Sometimes in your little corner, it's so easy to think that is all there is. But, as educators, let's get out there and connect internationally. And I really recommend LinkedIn to educators. It's one place you can get to connect with people all over the world. I've been able to make so many contacts lately when I began to have more presence on LinkedIn. So I think we need to just get out of our comfort zone and do a lot of networking internationally and get to know what's going on in other countries around the world. We're all learning 21st century skills, trying to connect all over, and it's just so much fun knowing what's going on in other people's corners of the world.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you so much for stopping by. I hope we can do something else, collaboratively in the future. And it's nice having you. And
okay. I thought you wanted to say something. Yeah, so I'm there.
Oh, I think we got cut off. Can you hear me?
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Brenda.
You're welcome. Thank you, Nancy.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, and I'm going to leave a link below.
I can hear you very clearly.
Okay, all right. So I am going to leave.
We shouldn't forget our personal. Okay, we shouldn't forget our personal and professional development as educators. Very important. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. And I think this is kind of part of it, connecting globally or internationally with different educators all over the world,
Yeah.
knowing about
Yeah.
educational systems, knowing about what educators are doing out there, in different
Yeah.
parts of the world. So thank you
Yeah.
so much. I'm glad we
Oh,
did
you're welcome, Dr.
this.
Brenda. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and take care of yourself, okay?
Yeah, thank you.
All right, bye.
Bye.